Excellence is about passion. It's about challenging ourselves. And taking on the most complex projects. It's about rolling up our sleeves and putting our years of experience to work. It's about exceeding client expectations and consistently delivering the perfect mold. It takes the right tools and the right team. Our engineers, designers, programmers, technicians, machinists, mold makers. We take pride in our process, the industries we serve. We simplify complexity by offering expert solutions with technical precision and genuine craftsmanship. If you can think it, we can build it. Mold making. It's an art form that we've perfected. It's a part of who we are. Accede Mold, where the mold is greater than the sum of its parts.
Hello, everyone. I'm Joe Pryweller, Conference Director for Plastics News. Welcome to Ask the Expert at the 2021 Plastics Caps and Closures Conference Virtual Edition. These sessions are your chance to engage with professionals on a range of topics and interact with questions. Today's Ask the Expert is sponsored by Accede Mold Tool. Our expert today is Camille Sackett, Vice President of Sales and Project Management. Camille will discuss Accede's journey in adopting and establishing a robust virtual remote mold sampling process. Camille will answer your questions after the presentation. To submit a question, open the Q&A box to the right of the video feed on the virtual event site and submit a question. Or if you're watching along on LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube, you can submit a question via those platforms. With that, I will turn things over to Camille Sackett of Accede Mold Tool. Camille, the floor is yours.
Well, it's great to see you, Joe, and this is a treat to get to spend time with you. And again, looking forward to our in-person event in 2022 in Chicago for Caps and Closures. Thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit about our remote mold sampling process. Could go to the next slide. Accede Mold Tool, just for context for the viewers, we are an injection mold builder founded in 1981 by Al Fox. His background is he was a toolroom manager at Thermo Fisher. So he took that knowledge and experience and opened up a tool shop, and Accede remains a family-owned company led by Roger Fox. And we have the third generation, his children and his nephew working at the company as well in operations, which is exciting. So we have 64 employees, and we focus on bringing solutions for the complex. So in the Rochester region, it's a heavily, there's a lot of great engineering schools with Rochester Institute of Technology and RPI and Cornell. So we've been fortunate so we leverage that talent and experience and knowledge, and we focus on bringing complex tooling solutions to market for our customers. We have two facilities, one where we have dedicated operations, engineering, manufacturing, all in-house inspection, and then we also do sampling. The second facility that we have is for turnkey. So if a customer is bringing in a press or automation or needs to do that qualification here on site, we do have that floor space available for customers. Next slide, please. And again, focusing on the complex, we do, just for context, we do about a third of our work that we're providing tooling for is for the medical sector, pharma, diagnostics type work. Another third is consumer. And then that last third is a mixed bag of industrial and military. But the common denominator is tackling the complex. So complexity would be difficult actions, using servo, etc. Go to the next slide, please. And so, again, we work to design and engineer and leverage mold technology. So that is high cavitation molds, stack molds, two-shot, and then, there's different types of two-shot, whether that's cube molds. So we've been doing that for over a decade now, and spin stack systems, and then a lot of in-mold actions and assembly, automation, and servo control. And that leads us into the remote validations. So next slide, please. So after we build a tool, typically pre-COVID, before there were travel restrictions and the world that we're all living in today, what that looked like at Accede is after we complete a build, is we would have a team coming in, our customer, our customer's customers coming on site, and they would want to watch the mold sample and be validated before we were to create and ship that mold into production. Next slide, please. So in 2019, we're doing close to $20 million in sales. Nearly every week, we had visitors in-house for mold qualifications. And that's demand. We're, again, a family-owned company, 64 employees. How do you make that work? There's demands on meeting rooms, demands on our management team's time during business hours and after hours entertaining customers. And then there's all those costs associated with hosting. So 2020, just again, when we saw, the repercussions, and as COVID was coming, we were here in New York State. We were ground zero. So New York State was quick to put travel restrictions and lockdowns in place. And at the same time, corporate responsibility. We were focused very much on keeping our employees safe, and we didn't want to bring visitors or guests in. But how do you continue business operations? Well, that's where was the prompt, and the imperative is that we needed to continue operations, deliver molds, and especially, we stepped up and spent a lot of our time delivering tools that were necessary for frontline diagnostics, for disinfectants, etc. Next slide, please. So the mandate from our owner, Roger Fox, is he says, besides just the travel restrictions, it just makes more sense. He says today's customers spread way too thin to spend days on site qualifying a mold that could be performed virtually, and our job is to make that experience seamless, detailed, and effective. Virtual samples are the most effective and efficient way to keep the focus on the mold and ensure performance excellence. And again, I think that's where he's trying to explain is there is so much downtime and activities that were going on as a mold is being hung in a press and being plumbed. It's not a productive use of our customers' time or their customers' time to be sitting around and waiting for the tool to be ready. And so by transitioning to this virtual format, and we'll get more into the nuts and bolts of that, it's sort of an on-demand experience. So our customers can join the meeting as soon as the mold is ready, up to temperature, and it's a very efficient and effective, let's look at the mold, that's what our focus is, in and out type of experience. Next slide, please. So our journey early in the pandemic, when it was hitting, the way our virtual samples started, we used FaceTime. And I think most people in their personal lives that they've had an experience working with FaceTime. It worked. The limitations, it's not a great premium quality. There's limited interactions because it's only the person that's using it or the people that have their phones connected to that. You can do a group FaceTime call. There's limited ability to share. The next step in our journey was to go in with a Vimeo live stream, and that was more of a broadcast type experience where we're turning on the remote sample and everyone can tune in and watch. And we also found that there was a bit of a delay, and we didn't want it to be a broadcast or our mold validation. It's an interactive process in real life. When people are on site, we wanted people to be able to engage. And if they had questions and wanted to see a specific mechanic, they could we can adjust our cameras and zoom in. And they could, if they wanted to, even on some presses, injection molding machines, you have the opportunity to take control. The customer's processor could go in and take control and play with processing. So where we netted out our final step in the journey today, and again, it continues to evolve, is we work with OBS Studio. And this production software, it's not a live stream. It's open source software with a large community of users. So the benefit of that is when you do have a lot of users, the pace for improvements and there's an accelerated improvement that happens because of all of the users using it. Next stream, please. So where we are today, again, we're using a blend of apps. We use OBS Studio software for the production. We use Zoom for collaboration. We had trialed Zooms and Teams and different other softwares. In the end, whatever, if your company is a Teams-based company, that would work as well. The OBS Studio pipes into your whatever meeting platform, virtual meeting platform that you want to use, it works. And then we use Vimeo for archiving. Eventually, though, with our Vimeo account, I think the intent is to move towards YouTube for some of that archiving. But again, we're working with our cybersecurity specialists to make sure that whatever we're using for archiving does meet all of our customer specifications. Next slide, please. So a summary of our learnings. You can use your company's standard collaborative software. These platforms optimize interactions. If your injection molding machine has remote operational capabilities, so that your customer can change the process on their own. I know Engel has an option to do that with some of their machines. We've done that. And there are not significant differences between the collaborative programs that we've found in our experience. We did, in the end, opt for Zoom, and we do maintain a subscription. It's been positive for us. The pros of replacing the OBS production software is the continuity of their streaming service. All live event setup is integrated right in their software. And so with the correct support, you can integrate a smartphone output into a feed if you want. The drawback that we experienced with OBS is that you need a stack of USB controller cards to keep plugging in for each individual camera, which means you should be using a desktop. And we use a laptop for the portability. So we just, press side, we have a tool cart set up with our laptop and all of our cameras and all of our cables, so that it's easy to, if a customer wants to see a mold and a press, that everything's set up and kitted right there. We just pull out our cart. Next slide, please. And again, just so nuts and bolts, the computer that we're using, we use a Dell with 17 CPU, 16 gigs of RAM, and a mid-level graphics card. That's important so that the streaming, that it's not choppy. And then we use the Elgato Cam Link to connect, and I can show you. You can see the Cam Link, and that basically just takes your camera, and you can see our camera. You're able to connect this and plug it into your laptop, and integrate that into a Zoom meeting. Next slide, please. We use a USB microscope. So again, you're not just seeing your mold run with a camera. We'll have multiple cameras set up. One is set up on the mechanics and the mold running. Another is set up on the screen of your injection molding machine. And then with this USB microscope, we are also showing plastic. So the customer is able to see all of this in real time. And then obviously you'll need tripods and mounts and studio lights for your presses. Next slide, please. And we found that the noise canceling headsets work really well for the production environment. When you're using just your phone to talk to the customer or using your laptop audio microphone, there's some noise in the background. So we've had good experience with these noise canceling headsets. Next slide, please. And I'll show a quick video so you can sort of get a sense or a flavor of what a remote sampling experience looks like at Accede. So you go ahead and play the video, please.
Accede coordinates the date and time with their customer. Our team works to understand the objectives of the mold sample well before the meeting. Based on the objectives, invitations to the Zoom meeting are emailed by Accede to the meeting participant and stakeholders. This includes our team and the customer's team. Before the meeting begins, Accede hangs and plumbs the mold in the appropriate injection molding machine. For turnkey programs, this would be the customer's press. Once the mold is ready and up to temperature, the meeting begins. The mechanics are evaluated and the process is developed and tested. For some turnkey programs, the customer has the ability to control the press from their end. Otherwise, the Accede team makes adjustments under the direction of the customer. Once the sample is complete and the mold is removed from the press, a mold teardown meeting is initiated. The customer has the ability to observe the mold teardown and give directions for checks, just as they would if they were physically on site. Once the remote validation is complete, we upload the video to a secure Vimeo account for the customer to download or reference as needed. Further, the recordings are archived by Accede with each electronic program folder. Today's customer is spread way too thin to spend days on-site qualifying a mold that could be performed virtually. Our job is to make that experience seamless, detailed, and effective. Virtual samples are the most effective and efficient way to keep the focus on the mold and ensure performance excellence.
So I hope that helps explain what a virtual sample at Accede looks like. And again, another benefit of doing that is typically customers were limited in how many resources they could send and attend one of their qualifications. So before, it might be the project manager from the customer, or it may have been project manager and the processing engineer. With a virtual format, if you're using these meetings, and you can actually do a hybrid type approach, a company only has to invest in sending one person, and then they can have their processing people, people from other countries. If the tool is eventually going to run, let's say in Europe, we've had that happen before. You could have as many people as you want, honestly. It's like a Teams meeting or a Zoom meeting that you're used to. I'm sure everyone at this point in business is used to experiencing. So this helps. And it's not just the tool watching that run. You can also do tool teardowns and inspection. So I just hope this encourages everyone to think about when you are bringing teams on site, considering doing it as a remote experience or even a hybrid experience. other business operations besides just the remote mold validation.
Thanks, Camille. Terrific presentation, and looks like the world is changing, obviously, and you've developed some new technology and new tools that may linger past the pandemic anyway. We're now ready to take questions. To submit a question, open the Q&A box to the right of the video feed on the virtual event site and submit a question there. Or if you're watching along on LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube, you can submit a question via those platforms. Camille, let's start. I thought I'd ask you a little bit about your COVID experience at Accede. What was it like as far as when things were shut down in New York State, and how did COVID impact your operations over the past year and a half?
I'm sure it's similar to a lot of what we've also experienced as humanity. We had our first priority was to make sure that our employees felt safe coming to work. So immediately the first thing that we did is, like, what's become the norm now is, hand sanitizers stations went up, temperature checks went up, and this is well before it was mandated, masking, contact tracing, all of the things that, looking back, they were new and we hadn't experienced them yet. And also one of the first things that Roger did, and this is, again, the benefit of working for a family company, that they can pivot this quickly. He put in a 2-week paid an additional sick pay, so that if people were thought that they had a cold or anything, that people weren't sort of fighting through it where they normally would before the pandemic, and coming to work sick, they could stay home and they would get their salary for the day. So that was even before it was. Now here it's law in New York State. So a lot of forward thinking about safety and making the employees feel safe. And then also, I think what helped our team a lot is knowing that the products, that the molds that we were making were essential, and we're going to be on the front lines fighting against COVID. That gave all of us a lot of pride because it's a risk at the time, when we didn't know much about the disease, coming to work. So that inspired a lot of people to still take that risk, go through the hand sanitizing, go through the safety protocols, and show up for work. So it was scary, just like I'm sure it was for a lot of, all of humanity, honestly.
Did you keep your facilities open pretty much throughout this, even in the worst of it?
Yeah, we had to, because we were doing, diagnostics work for COVID.
Sure.
So there was also the fear of, the government, what that would look like with for defense.
Oh, definitely. You're doing a lot of medical work too. I imagine that's changed quite a bit because of COVID, or ramped up anyway, if nothing else, right?
Yeah. And think about it, was difficult. We do, packaging for wipes that a lot of people were using, and, things that couldn't stay on the shelves. We were building molds for some of those products.
Oh, sure. Well, let's talk a little bit about the remote mold validation and your work in that area. It sounds like a great development to Accede. What triggered it? What allowed you to do this kind of thing? Was it just people not traveling, or was there something else that did you see any examples of this elsewhere, or was it something that you just decided,
Well,
there's no software out there for it?
Yeah, no, for us, it was essential. We had to continue operations, just continuity of the business. We can't ship a mold without doing a validation first. It's a risk for our customers. They need to ensure that it's going to work mechanically as they expect it to, that it's going to process parts as they expect it to. So it was just, innovation. It was on the fly. We needed to come up with something to be able to continue business operations. And it was difficult, because everyone was switching to work from home, to even go and buy cameras. And I'm sure if you've experienced it as well, because as offices were shutting down to get web cameras, the shelves were empty. But we had some crafty shoppers. We got what we needed, and we kept things moving.
I'm impressed with all the trial and error that you went through and all the different platforms and try different things. It sounds like there wasn't a quick and easy solution for some of this anyway, but I bet you it took a lot of work to get it down, get the process down and get it down the right way anyway. There's not a handbook out there you could follow, right?
No, and that's what we're fortunate in, that we have a culture of innovation. We are, as part of our, mold design process, everything that we do, it's sort of in the fabric of who we are, to always want to get better, that continuous improvement. So those loops of do it, evaluate it, improve, that's in our nature. So that's where we're at. And even with where our virtual sample is today, it's just normal that we're going to continue to work to make it better.
Oh, sure. Along with some of this, did you find that there was a huge time savings? I know there's travel time for your customers not having to come to Rochester for it, but even within the mold validation process, did you find there's a lot of time savings in this that you found instead of having it done in person?
Oh, absolutely. It takes time to do the setup and send the meeting invites out, but as our production, you essentially need a production team, which we're a mold shop. We did not have a production team on hand,
Right.
but IT was able to, again, innovate and come up with solutions and do training so that the burden wasn't on one person. It's definitely saved time mostly for our customers. And again, one thing we really hadn't considered when we were instituting it is we're showing the mold to our customer, the factory where that tool is going to run. And it was typically just one or two people that could participate when it was a live event because of the affordability of it. And now with a remote sample, if a customer still wants to travel, they also can do both. We can have one customer or two people here on site watching it in person, but they're able to pipe in their team and get training for their production environment, so that they're comfortable and excited to receive that mold in-house and have had the opportunity to watch it to do that trial, because there's learnings that happen with the trial. So that's been a benefit that we did not foresee, an unintended consequence that's been great in using it for training and getting more people involved.
So you think you continue using this even as the pandemic wanes? We all hope anyway, over the next few months or a year anyways. Is this going to be a part of what Accede does in the future?
Absolutely. Yeah. This is our default for validation because it has been so much more effective for us and positive for our customers in being able to get more of their team engaged in the mold validation process.
I imagine this works particularly well if you have a customer that has different plants or even something overseas or whatever. Is that where you're finding the most benefit for some of this? If there's in multiple facilities anyway?
Absolutely. Exactly. So we have we sell to U.S. companies, and some of those U.S. companies have plants overseas. So exactly what you said, Joe, is, the order came through North America, but eventually that mold will be home, let's say in, the Netherlands. The team from the Netherlands can watch that sample and get that training and heads up before, months before they'll actually see that tool.
Oh, sure. That makes sense. Are there any hurdles remaining with this? Basically, you think you've solved most of the main challenges with doing this?
I think we've solved most of the main challenges. I think we'll continue to look at other studio software to see what else is easier to use. And again, just looking at cameras and lighting and different mounts for the cameras, things like that.
Sure. Well, great. With that, we're out of time. Do you have any final comments or any final thoughts you want to leave the audience with, essentially?
I think we're, again, just keep your eyes open as you are looking at your business processes and operations to innovate, because again, this was not something that we were planning for, and that, this traditional face-to-face experience. And it's been a tremendous improvement for us and service that we're providing to our customers. Very well received, great feedback from customers for the service. So I'd encourage you to look at other operations within your organization and look to see what you could do with video, and because the price of the equipment and the quality of the software that's available, it's cost effective, and it could make significant improvements to your own operation. So thank you for the time to catch up, and it's good to see you again, Joe.
Great, you too, Camille. And thank you for a great presentation, for sharing your journey to remote mold validation. If you have additional questions for Camille, her email address is on the screen. You can email her directly. I'm sure she'd be happy to talk more about it. Today's Ask the Expert session will be available for viewing on the events site of Plastics News, events section of Plastics News website after this is over. I want to remind you, don't forget to join us this afternoon at the Plastics Caps and Closures Conference at 2 p.m. Eastern. We're featuring a special panel discussion with top global caps and closures producers on the future of tethered closures. Then at 3:30 p.m., join us for a roundtable discussion on supply chain issues as a bit of a follow-up to Penny Walters' presentation this morning on supply chain challenges. I'm Joe Pryweller with Plastics News. Thanks for joining us at this session of Ask the Expert. We'll see you soon.